I think we have a question that popped up there, and while they're working on that, I'm going to ask Stacy to come back as well, and I'll ask a question that came in for her, and working on the questions for you, Hamilton. So hang with me, Hamilton. Stacy, you're here. Okay. Are you tracking the increasing number of rogue processors, illegal processors, or the viability of the mobile processing?
So I think there's two parts to this question. One is, do we need to get a good idea of those individuals out there that are currently doing custom? Yes, we do. And I think the other part of the question is those that are rogue or that others may think are not doing it right. We need to really look at that, because I think that's what Nevada Department of Agriculture is struggling with right now. Do you write that regulation, or what does that regulation look like? Do you want to regulate everybody out of the business? Do you want to do that regulation halfway? Do you just want to do it a little bit? Or do you want to find some kind of middle ground where maybe those individuals that we call rogue, you can work with them and find a way that they can safely and humanely custom process or slaughter and process the meat. So I think it's a tough question. Yes, I think we have a lot of work to do within the state of Nevada. I do I would tell you to work with NDA. They did hold their first workshop. I'm not exactly sure how that process is all going to go out, but to work with them and make your comments and to kind of start paying attention to what our systems in Nevada look like. So I hope I answered that question effectively, Barry.
Yes, thank you, Stacy. We got questions coming in faster than we can get them written down. Okay. Yes, I think so, Stacy. That's an issue, and it's going to be something that somebody's going to have to pay attention to when this gets up and running. Dr. DeMello, come back to us. Question: how do you change people's perceptions of dry versus wet? They believe what they believe.
We change by showing the data what I did right now, right? So, you know, sometimes it's hard, and there's a story that I keep telling people, right? I have a 75 years old dad, and sometimes I come to my dad and say, hey, why are you using this razor? You know, if you use this razor here that has like 3 blades, that's going to be better. So I'm not going to change. That one is better. And that's some problems not only me face here. So there's a lot of, there's a perception from us on campus that when you go out there and you try to explain people things that they're not really open to hear that. And I have been facing this too. And I understand, right? I think that my role here is actually to get all this data. A project that I presented costs around like $30,000. We have people involved. We have selected panelists. We trained them for like 3 weeks, 2 weeks before going to this. And then we spent a lot of time in the lab trying to come up with data, showing them, hey, this is not what really happened. We have this second trial right now that we have 80 days, right? We run 80 days. There were some difference that needs to be addressed. But when we talk about 42 and 21 days, you didn't see any difference. So you expect that people will listen to you, but that's their own criteria, right? It's not everyone who believes in science, and it's not everyone who believes they're opinionated. And I, you know, at a point that I am, I respect people. I think that respect is the first thing. You know, I'm not here trying to make people swallow that information. I'm just trying to present the data that I spend time working, and I think that is useful for people to understand how this works.
Great. And of course, we have to understand as well that there are aberrations from tendencies. So what you're presenting is a tendency. And so someone may have a completely different set of taste bud arrangements that could absolutely yield different results. And so this next question is related to that. Is an umami the taste detector that makes some people gag on butterscotch?
Well, there's a lot of things that umami is related to, right? The majority of the compounds that are associated to the umami flavor, they're actually vegetable ones. So you can see a lot of umami flavor coming from soy sauce, for example. Some people you notice that, but it's, you know, it's clear that over the last 25 years, people are studying these a lot, and there is a very strong relationship of better acceptability when you have a better umami perception. So going back to what Dr. Perriman said, which is very important too. So some people, they have rearrangements, they are different, but don't forget that that's not the majority of the population. So the majority of the population, for example, and I was talking to one student that I had from India yesterday. He cooks with a lot of spices, right? And very hot, right? We know that if you have hot stuff in your mouth, is actually does not let you to perceive other flavors. So there is not only rearrangements, that as a culture, that is actually what you're eating, so what your habits are. So you don't expect that, you know, somebody who does not eat meat frequently will notice the difference between dry and wet age. So, you know, if it exists. So, but yeah, that's umami seems to be a interesting thing.
Okay, I've got a couple of more questions that have come in here. On a taste test with broiled steaks,
Boiled.
age, in a taste test with broiled steaks, would wet age and dry age taste the same?
Well, it depends. If you, like, as I always keep telling that people, right? So it doesn't matter, you know, theoretically what cooking style you're going to use. If you were grilling a piece of grass-fed lean steak in your prime steak, and if you put a chunk of butter this size on the top, boom, right? You're going to actually change all the flavor perception. You're going to be able to. We run taste panels here with students every year. Now, not of the COVID right now. When they have like 100 students coming and tasting grass and grain, lean and fatty, and fat, right? The majority of them prefer the fat ones. And you know, we will, if you cook the same steak using the same method, right? You might have some differences if you were doing something lean and fat, but not regarding dry and wet. So for example, if I grill a prime steak, if I grill a select steak using the same method, the same broiling method, right? That steak that has more fat will always taste better. Why? Because the fat that inside of the fat that is inside of that steak is going to stimulate the production of saliva. You will have a sense of better moisture inside of your mouth because the fat hits that taste bud, the fat hits your mouth and allows you to actually produce more saliva. So what really changes is the amount of fat.
Diet preferences are very complex.
Say it again?
I say diet preferences are very complex on the individual level.
Right.
Another question, would the waste involved with dry as opposed to wet aging be worth presenting, as that may also influence people's preferences?
That's a very important question because the waste that you generate right there is what makes the thing cost more. So there are two major things. There are two major things that make dry aged beef cost you more. And that's not the fact that the flavor is. Don't get it wrong. It's because when you dry age, you usually let that meat in the cooler longer. So you have more electricity costs. And then you lose all that moisture, which in our case here is just like a 1%. It's not going to concentrate in the meat juice, but at the same time, you lose the moisture, you lose the weight, and then moisture loss might affect higher yield losses, so you trim everything out. So long story short is you pay more because you dry and you remove the dry parts and you extend your time in the refrigerator. So how does this work, right? This works because there is a significant amount of marketing programs, right? Especially local, not local, like in some retail stores. So if you go to New York, for example, right? So you're going to have a lot of people who look for the dry aging because they really don't understand how this really works. But when you get that big, awesome ribeye steak right there, there's a lot of butter with basil and garlic on the top, right? Always going to taste good. What happens if I do exactly the same thing with something that's not dry aged? So that might be a difference, right? I'm not saying that you might not be. Our study actually showed different, show some signs that could be a difference. You guys saw the volatiles going a little bit more. But the long story short is when somebody tasted, they didn't catch it, right? I catch sometimes grass versus grain, and I have been doing this for like 20 years. I catch it very easy, right? Sometimes I do. But regarding dry and wet, when you cook the same way and you put the same season on the top, that's hard to see it. Really hard. What makes the difference is the fat amount. Okay. There's always going to be some marketing there telling us something is better.
Next question. Will you be developing a pamphlet, a fact sheet, pamphlet to explain putting your presentation in a simple form?
Yes, I will do that. There is a this project was supposed to be finished like last year. I have a current grad student that unfortunately got delayed because of the COVID. We're supposed to have finished that project by last year, so we will be able to generate a pamphlet and leave the Meat Science website. Yes, we will definitely do that. We have the pictures ready. We have like 60% of the data analyzed. And you're going to definitely translate that in a way that people can understand that easily.
Okay. I have one additional question here. So bear with me. What sort of price difference per pound should a processor charge for dry versus wet aged beef if they both have to be aged for 14 days?
For 14 days, right? So if you break down the carcass price and if you break down there, so if you get your meat outside of the cooler in 4 or 5 days and you wet age at the end in a retail store in your house, that costs probably like $2 less than keeping that meat in the refrigerator, from $1 to $2 per pound. Okay. And that we did that study before we started. So here, yes, it's gonna cost you a little bit more, especially if you do not have a cooler that's efficient. You might have problems. People open the cooler a lot. You have a lot of traffic right there. That's going to suck more energy. You're going to lose more money for sure.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. My email is hamilton@cabner.unr.edu. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email. I'm pretty good in answering them. Thank you for the opportunity to be here again today. Thank you, Dr. Perriman and Stacy, for organizing everything, and Robert, because I know that Robert is behind all the technology part.
Okay, hang on here. I've got some housekeeping to do here. Okay, I've got one more question. Hamilton?
I'm back.
Come on back. One more question here. Dr. DeMello, on occasion we gather and sell a steer heifer that missed being gathered. Okay, and maybe 3 or 4 years old. Okay, we're talking about slicks, right? Well, maybe not slicks, but you missed them, and they may be 3 or 4 years old before they go to market. Does this type of aged beef lend well to a certain type of preparation? Is there an ideal way to process, prepare, and serve this type of beef?
So, and I'm going to give you guys a very easy example, and it's something that I faced today, right? So everything that's older, we're going to have, so think about all your muscle, right? Your muscle is wrapped by a collagen sheet, right? So what happened was inside of that fibers, you also have wraps. So that wraps are made from fibers, collagen fibers. When you get old, that collagen fibers, they actually cross. So this means that older animals, we always have problems with tenderness. We always have problems with tenderness because of the cross link of the collagens. That's why I'm 43, guys. So I'm having problems with stretching. So I don't actually hit my feet anymore, right? Because that collagen is getting very, very cross linked. So I need to keep stretching every time. So when you have a longer, older animal, so the best thing you to do is to ground as a hamburger. That's actually what, the majority of the meat companies, they do, and have like old cows from dairy, right? So everything turns to hamburger, same protein, it's just older animal. And you can actually try to slow cook that thing in a crock pot longer, but you're not going to have the same effect when you cook some things from a younger animal, just because your collagen fibers cross-link.
Great. Now I know it's collagen's fault.
It's probably collagen's fault after 5 years old, sir.
At my age, it's a lot of collagen's fault.
Somebody told me you're younger than me, Barry.
They lied to you.
Well, I have hair, I don't.
Well, yeah. I won't argue with you there.